Dear friends, welcome to another episode in the fantastic military world. In this video, we will talk about the terrible attack carried out on Friday, March 22nd at the Crocus City Hall in Moscow. What are the certainties and the mysteries surrounding this terrible attack that left 137 dead? And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any news. On Friday night, in Russia, 4 heavily armed terrorists stormed the Crocus City Hall near Moscow, precisely when the venue was almost full for a show. The attack was horrendous, with terrible videos showing the terrorists shooting directly at people in the location. Russian sources reported that at least 137 people died, with hundreds injured. The terrorists also used grenades and incendiary bombs, resulting in a fire that destroyed part of the venue. Shortly after the images began to circulate, ISIS, one of the many branches of the Islamic State, claimed responsibility for the attack. But what do we concretely know about the attack, and why are there so many theories and mysteries floating around? According to information released by the Russian government, the terrorists, all natives of Tajikistan, had been contacted by an Islamic cleric through a Telegram group, who offered 500,000 rubles to each, equivalent to about $5,000. The 4 arrived at the Crocus City Hall just before 8 p.m., all heavily armed with rifles and bombs, immediately heading to the main show hall, which was almost entirely full. In the main hall, the terrorists fired upon the audience, killing and injuring dozens, throwing incendiary bombs that started the fire, which quickly got out of control. About 10 minutes later, they left the main hall and headed for the exit, firing along the way, injuring and killing even more people who, in panic, tried to leave the packed venue. Approximately 15 minutes after the attack began, the terrorists disappeared from the location, leaving behind a terrible scene of death and destruction, with a sad toll of 137 people dead and hundreds injured. From this point on, things become strange, with many doubts remaining in the air. The first being, how did the terrorists manage to leave the venue, which at that time was already surrounded by hundreds of police officers? As soon as the attack alarm was activated, hundreds of firefighters, ambulances, and police officers quickly converged on the Crocus City Hall, with the security perimeter being set up while the attack was ongoing inside the building. With so many police officers around the place, the way the heavily armed terrorists managed to escape in the same car they arrived in is strange. Moreover, they managed to pass through the security perimeter set up around the show hall. The terrorists managed to leave Moscow precisely at a time when the main access roads of the Russian capital were blocked and filled with security checkpoints. And as if all this were not enough, they then traveled almost 400 kilometers on a federal highway southward, with the terrorists being intercepted when they were just tens of kilometers from the Belarusian border and the Ukrainian border. This raises another intriguing question. Exactly where were they fleeing to? Almost 24 hours after the attack, Vladimir Putin finally made his first statement on the attack, saying, among other things, that Ukraine was directly involved. It was expected that Putin would accuse Ukraine of involvement, but with the Islamic State officially claiming the attack, it became difficult for Putin to fit Ukraine into this narrative. To get around this, Putin invented the narrative that Ukraine had given a safe passage for the terrorists to cross its border. This is where doubts and questions grow even more. As we all know, the border between Russia and Ukraine is fully militarized, with thousands of Russian and Ukrainian soldiers stationed in the area, and numerous security checkpoints along all roads leading to the border, especially on the Russian side. Therefore, it is at least strange to imagine that 4 terrorists wanted in Russia would have any chance of crossing all those checkpoints and the massive concentration of Russian troops along the Ukrainian border to take advantage of the so-called window that Putin accused Ukraine of opening for them to safely enter the country. This situation leaves many important questions in the air for which there is no clear answer, leading to the emergence of conspiracy theories. One of them involves an alleged Russian false flag. A false flag is when a country carries out an attack against itself just to be able to accuse another country, using it as a justification for harsher and more severe responses. Vladimir Putin has a lot of experience with this. In September 1999, a series of explosions in the cities of Moscow, Buynaksk, and Volgodonsk killed more than 300 people, with over 1,000 injured. At the time, Vladimir Putin was the Prime Minister of Russia and personally took charge of managing the crisis. Putin immediately accused Chechnya, a Russian separatist republic, with the Chechens denying any involvement and even motivation for the attack. In 1996, Chechnya had won the war it fought against Russia, with both sides signing a peace agreement. Therefore, all the Chechens wanted at that time was to avoid increasing tensions with Moscow. However, Putin used the September 1999 attacks as a justification to restart the war, a war that was supported by Ahmed Kadyrov, who betrayed the Chechens by joining forces with Russia. According to various historians, the 1999 bombings were actually a false flag orchestrated by Putin to justify restarting the war in Chechnya, a war that this time was won by Russia, and resulted in the almost complete destruction of that republic, with its capital Grozny being reduced to ashes. This successful experience of the alleged Russian false flag in Chechnya in 1999 is leading some sources to suggest that the terrorist attack in Moscow could be something similar, aiming to involve Ukraine and give Putin the justification he needs to further escalate his effort in the war. Interestingly, a few days before the attack, Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson, referred to the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a war for the first time, not as a special military operation. And also, a few days before the attack, Sergei Shoigu, the Russian Minister of Defense, announced the creation of 2 new armies, totaling more than 500,000 new soldiers, a number that, from many sources, can only be achieved if there is a new mobilization in Russia, a highly unpopular procedure that would be more easily accepted by Russian society if it were done in response to an attack like the one that occurred in Moscow. On the other hand, many sources more aligned with Russia also accuse Ukraine of participating in the attack. But a very important question arises. What would Ukraine gain from this? An attack like this, if it were indeed carried out by Ukraine, would only provide the justification Putin is looking for to further radicalize his invasion. Therefore, it is evident that Ukraine would have nothing to gain from organizing and executing an attack of this magnitude. As you can see, there is still very little concrete information about the attacks in Moscow, which contributes to the emergence of theories and assumptions that only hinder the analysis of the facts. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and activate the notification bell to not miss any news, criticisms, ideas, or suggestions. You can leave them in the comments.